On the 13th of December 2019, the newly elected Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, stood outside number 10 and said, "Let the healing begin." We are, he said, as a nation, tired. So this government would be a people's government, a one-nation government that will level up and unite. He's not the first Prime Minister, though, to kind of touch on the moral purpose of government. Margaret Thatcher, she borrowed the words of St. Francis of Assisi when she said in 1979, "Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. And where there is despair, may we bring hope." But in this busy, busy world of getting on and doing things and expecting governments to kind of do everything for us, is it realistic to expect the government to heal a nation? I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that over the past few years, we have, as a nation at times, felt that we are suffering from a mini nervous breakdown. So of course we elect governments to get on and do things. Who can blame us? But isn't that precisely why we keep getting stuck? Just getting on and doing things without knowing why, without having a shared set of values or beliefs or principles to guide us, is why I think that we keep seeing good policy ideas disappoint, fail, lead to more elections, more to-do lists. So today I'm going to talk to you about what governments could be and the role that all of you can play too. And it starts with being a more human government. It's a 5-step journey, and it's my journey. So it's really important I say that this is not the words or the point of view of any of the organisations you may have heard just being spoken about, because this is my personal journey, and I really want to share my learning and experiences with all of you today. So let me start by saying that I am a former civil servant in Whitehall, and I tried my very best to get as close as I could, whenever I could, to those people impacted by government. I was at the intersection of policy, politics, and communication, and I loved my job, but it was difficult to get out there. And this brings me to step 1, which is get to know the victims and survivors of the system, because they are all around us. And during my time, I got to meet a lady called Rose. Rose was a single mum, she ran a business, and she got into trouble. And then she lost the business and started to worry about how she could feed, nurture her children. And every time she came up against the system, and by the system I mean welfare, employment, services like that, she would often feel that the system was just trying to do things for her, to her, never with her. And Rose, well, she could navigate her way through anything. But every time she went to the job centre, she would say she just felt really numb, low, and like a low number, in fact. So just when she really needed encouragement, she just felt more demoralised. So working on those inquiries and meeting Rose and many like her kind of taught me that governments are really good at managing people and resources. They're not particularly well equipped at those really complex human face-to-face challenges. But I was about to learn my biggest lesson yet. Step 2, recognise when you are part of the problem. Now, in the last stage of my career in Whitehall, I was working on social mobility and social exclusion across government departments. And I was out one day with a Minister for Social Exclusion, and I met some teenage mums, and they were lovely, and they just really wanted to feel like their lives still mattered. And one said really bravely, "Look, I want to be a role model for my child. I just can't fight a whole system." And then something struck me. How was it that after over a decade of working in government and so much resources going in and hitting these really hard targets, hard work, high impact, that I was still hearing stories like this? And then it struck me. Maybe I am part of the problem. I wasn't fulfilling my moral purpose. Relationships and trust were falling down, and that was my business. Why? Well, I think I and hundreds like me working at the centre of government were just working too far away from the realities of life. And when you work far away from the realities of everyday life, you know what? You fear. You start to fear that if you don't do anything, no one will do anything. You start to adopt a mentality of command and control. Step 3, Be aware of a command and control mentality for those really complex, people-focused problems. Government in this country has a lot of power at the centre. It also has a lot of accountability. Many countries do. It's accountable to Parliament, to the law courts, to media, and to people like you and me. So it needs to have some command and control. Of course it does. And back in the 90s, a really nice sounding concept came along. It really helped government to think about how they could be in both control of people and resources. And they were always being accused of being wasteful. And the mentality kind of went a bit like this. Government needs to think a bit more like a business. So, some characteristics of running government like a business that came along in the 90s. So, citizens are viewed as customers, public servants as managers. Public servants can be incentivized through performance measures and targets. Performance measures and indicators can determine success or failure, and business models and ownerships can be varied, open to the markets, so they can drive up competition and drive down costs. Now, all of us as taxpayers want to see efficient governments that deliver value for money. Of course we do. And this particular concept did make sense. So, for example, learning from business allowed governments to transform into a digital-first nation. So there's really boring things you have to do with government, like those paper-based exercises of renewing your driving licenses and passports, transactional processes, just suddenly became easier with digital. And with overnight digital successes, it made sense to learn from that business. But even the digital brigade, when they turned up in government with their jeans, sneakers, and T-shirts and all their great ideas, we were really excited, but even they couldn't get close to those really big human-focused problems. Why? Because government isn't always like a business. How? Because government can't always choose its customers. And when government isn't there at that critical point for those customers, lives can simply fall apart. So we were really doing very well. I thought we were. Big problems were being tackled, but I could see that something was still missing. What was it? I believe that we were missing relationships. The ability for people to come together and solve a problem. We were missing belief in one another. We started to mistrust the motives of strangers, people not like you and me maybe, people who needed our help. We lost good people. This was a time, though, despite all our successes, we saw a lot of people leave the public service and sickness rates just went up. What were we going to do? Well, in this world of very big, complex problems, we were going to need to think of a new way of thinking about complexity. We're going to need another tool in our toolkit. We're going to switch our mentality now from command and control to this. And the government is, today, trying to understand complexity. And this that you see behind me here is complexity. And it demonstrates the many influences of a complex problem that is obesity. And in this web, or mess if you like, are lots of different things going on. Now, complexity isn't a new word, I know that, but it is worth reminding ourselves of 4 characteristics of a complex problem. So there's an intricate and interconnected web of cause and effect. No single point of truth. Outcomes are created by a whole system, and there's a high degree of unpredictability. How are we going to lead in a world like this? And on top of that, this isn't the obesity map for everybody. Everyone's obesity map would look different depending on the influences that most had an impact on their life. My goodness. So we were going to have to think of something else. We were going to need to understand that in that system, we needed to tell the truth, we needed to trust one another, and enable relationships in that web to happen. We needed to understand how to trust. So 5 years ago, I and some colleagues set up the Centre for Public Impact, and we wanted to look into how you can trust one another and enable that messy system to happen. Step 4, build legitimacy to embrace complexity. We did a lot of studies, and we saw that so often the missing ingredient from much of our policy making here and all over the world was legitimacy. We needed to build it. But what does that actually mean? We went out and we asked people all over the world to tell us, what is legitimacy to you today? And we got some amazing stories, beautiful ones, and I really want to share a couple with you today. One day, I was invited to South London, to the Marcus Lipton Youth Centre in Brixton, and there I met some fabulous young people, and I knew that they were having troubled lives. I was prepared to talk to them about it, but I wasn't ready or prepared for them to say, well, what are you actually doing here? Who are you? Explain your being. So I needed to dig deep and connect with them on a very human level. And when I did that, they shared a lot of stories with me about their struggles. This is how they cooperate. This is how they communicate. And they told me that governments and public sector services would send people down with jobs fairs and markets, and they didn't want to show up. And then I talked to civil servants, and they'd say, oh, we put resources in, we go down there, they don't show up. They don't care. Back to HQ, back to doing things. And I heard similar stories all over the world. And legitimacy matters because the relationship between citizens and governments is fundamental to achieving long-term success. And when I went to Saskatchewan in Canada, I heard another similar story. I heard the young people of Saskatchewan in Canada, the First Nations students, tell me about the struggles and traumas that they were having as the Canadian government was trying to move from truth to reconciliation. They also, by the way, asked me to dig deep, really connect with them on a human level before they could share the pain and trauma that they were suffering. But when we got to know one another, you should have seen them. They just cooperated. They had these amazing ideas to get from truth to reconciliation. And one of the ideas that they came up with, just for example, was, well, why can't they just teach all of the schools in Canada about what happened to our people? And amazing more ideas like that came, if only government could hear them. So for all these young people, it's storytelling, it's truth, it's relationships that matter. And I know we like to think of young people as never off their iPhones and on their apps, and probably I expect someone is right now. But this is their world, this is their business, truth and relationships, and they want it to be government's business too. But it wasn't just young people. Actually, everywhere we went in the world, we kind of heard the same things coming up. Everywhere, young and old people were telling us they wanted to work together with people towards a shared vision. They wanted to build authentic connections. They wanted to bring empathy into government and enable the public to scrutinise government. They wanted citizens' voices to be valued and listened to and responded to. And this isn't tough. This is really good, because everyone we met wanted to participate. They wanted to have a seat at the table, but they wanted new tables, not at the end of those boring consultation forms or town halls that no one's going to be at anymore. They wanted a voice, and they found their voice. This kind of new wave of activism is really capturing governments all over the world. I mean, just remember, obviously Greta Thunberg has inspired generations of children, parents, grandparents, all of whom would never have dreamed of skipping a day of school or the office, and off they go to protest for more climate change. This is activism that we need to embrace and love. We could really reimagine what it meant when people say, we want some more control. And it's going to mean sharing power, and it's happening in places you wouldn't quite imagine. Wigan, Greater Manchester. Yes, Wigan tore up the rules and said to people, you decide the spending priorities of your town, and they did. And Wigan is now a place of pride and a place where people all over the world are coming to ask us to learn from. In Gloucestershire, in our own country here, the police are reconnecting and learning how to build relationships with those communities that they may have lost. And nationally as well, New Zealand has something called the spirit of the service. It's lovely. It asks public servants to connect back to why they are in their jobs. And the most senior civil servant in New Zealand recently came to speak to us, and what he said really, really struck me. I'd like to share it with you. He said, sitting behind the 1990s reforms was a very utilitarian view of the public service. It saw public service as the delivery arm of government, and a contestable one at that. But what we lost was a sense of being part of something bigger, with a higher purpose, with a moral purpose. In many ways, he said, I think we lost our heart. But to do this is going to take more than the senior civil servant or Greta or you and me or a prime minister to heal a nation. It's going to take all of us. we're all going to have to start to listen, and we'll need those new spaces to listen and talk to each other now. And that's happening in Estonia, for example, where they rewrote the democratic processes using a citizens' assembly and deliberative online forums. They've done it in Reykjavik, where they crowdsourced their education policy. They did it in Ireland, you might remember, where they actually came to a decision about the tough abortion laws in their own country. And in here, our own country, the United Kingdom, we're about to have our first citizens' assembly on climate change. Fantastic. But does this new method really just work? This enabling, trusting way of working in government, does it work beyond just listening better? Can you actually run a service and a government like that? We think so. So at the Centre for Public Impact, we tested our thought on the social working sector, the toughest sector probably to do it on. And when we said to social workers, you reimagine how you could run your services with families without that commanding and controlling environment, they did. And guess what? They were able to save 50% of their time. That's 50% more time that they could spend with families. But I think it's going to take one more thing. I think, and this is my step 5, that we are going to need to create a new vision founded on shared beliefs, on shared values and principles. I think we can do it. I've shown and spoken to you today about those countries that are trying, and it is working. And at the Centre for Public Impact, we had a go ourselves. We took all our listening and learning and we put it into what we call a manifesto for effective and legitimate government. And it looks a bit like this. And now look, it's not a prescription, so, but just be maybe inspired by it. Think about maybe whether you can create your own kind of manifesto for your town, community, organization, country. So beliefs such as, the quality of human relationships matters. Values we can all agree on, such as humility, authenticity, diversity, and principles like challenge the voices of those you hear the least. Now, just a quick reminder of my 5-step journey. Now, in a few weeks' time, my organisation is going to put out a new vision for the future of government in the UK. And in it we say we should be creating the right conditions for people everywhere to flourish. Government should be enabling and not suffocating. But we're going to need to stop thinking that governments alone can heal a nation. We can all help them to do it. If we are going to level up, you and me, we're all going to need to step up. We need to listen, we need to learn, we need to adapt. I really think we can do it. Now let the healing begin. Thank you.